Judges-Shophetim. Judges, rulers, chapter 1. And it came to be after the death of Yehoshua that the children of Yisra'eel asked Yahuwah, saying, Who of us should go up first against the Canaanites to fight against them? And Yahuwah said, Yehudah does go up. See, I have given the land into his hand. And Yehudah said to Shimron, his brother, Come up with me into my allotment, and let us fight against the Canaanites, and I myself shall also go with you into your allotment. So Shimron went with him. And Yehudah went up, and Yahuwah gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. And they smote 10,000 men at Bezeq. And they found Aḍoni-Ďebezeq in Bezeq, and fought against him, and smote the Canaanites and the Perizzites. But Aḍoni-Ďebezeq fled, and they pursued him, and caught him, and cut off his thumbs and big toes. And Aḍoni-Ďebezeq said, 70 servants with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to gather food under my table. As I have done, so Elohim has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. And the children of Yehudah fought against Jerusalem, and captured it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire. And afterward the children of Yehudah went down to fight against the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountains in the south and in the low country. And Yehudah went against the Canaanites who dwelt in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba. And they smote Shishai and Ahiman and Tamiah. And from there they went against the inhabitants of Debar. Now the name of Debar was formerly Kiriath-Sepher. And Caleb said, He who smites Kiriath-Sepher and shall capture it, to him I shall give my daughter Achsah his wife. And Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him his daughter Achsah as wife. And it came to be, when she came in, that she urged him to ask her father for a field. And when she got off from her donkey, Caleb said to her, What is the matter? And she said to him, Give me a blessing, since you have given me land in the south. Give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. And the children of the Kenite father-in-law of Moshe went up from the city of palms with the children of Yehudah into the wilderness of Yehudah, which is in the Negeb of Arad. And they went and dwelt among the people. And Yehudah went with Shimron his brother, and they smote the Canaanites who inhabited Sephath, and put it under the ban. So the name of the city was called Hormah. And Yehudah captured Azah and its border, and Ashkelon and its border, and Ekron and its border. And Yahuwah was with Yehudah, so they took possession of the mountains. But they were unable to drive out the inhabitants of the plain, because they had chariots of iron. And they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moshe had said, and he drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak. However, the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who inhabited Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have dwelt with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. And the house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and Yahuwah was with them. And the house of Joseph sent men to spy out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the watchmen saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, Please show us the entrance to the city, and we shall show you kindness. So he showed them the entrance to the city, and they smote the city with the edge of the sword. But the man and all his clan they let go. And the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city, and called its name Luz, which is its name to this day. And Manasseh did not dispossess Beth Shean and its villages, nor Tanakh and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Yibleam and its villages, nor the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages, for the Canaanites desired to dwell in their land. And it came to be, when Yisra'eel was strong, that they put the Canaanites into compulsory labor, but did not completely drive them out. Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites who dwelt in Gaza, so the Canaanites dwelt in their midst in Gaza. Neither did Zebulun drive out the inhabitants of Kidron or the inhabitants of Nahalal, so the Canaanites dwelt in their midst and became compulsory labor. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Achol, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Hableb, nor of Akzib, nor of Helba, nor of Aphiz, nor of Rehob. So the Asherites dwelt in the midst of the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Beth-Anath. But they dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, and the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh. And of Beth-Anath became compulsory labor for them. And the Amorites pressed the children of Dan into the mountains, for they would not allow them to come down to the valley. And the Amorites desired to dwell in Mount Hur, in Ailon, and in Shur-albim. But when the hand of the house of Joseph became stronger, they became compulsory labor, and the border of the Amorites was from the ascent of Agrabim, from Salah and upward. Shophetim, chapter 2. And the messenger of Yahuwah came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up from Mizraim and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I do not break my covenant with you. And as for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. Break down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? Therefore I also said, I am not driving them out before you, and they shall be adversaries to you, and their mighty ones shall be a snare to you. And it came to be, when the messenger of Yahuwah spoke these words to all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they called the name of that place Bochim, and slaughtered there to Yahuwah. Then Yehoshua dismissed the people, and the children of Yisra'eel went each to his own inheritance to possess the land. And the people served Yahuwah all the days of Yehoshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Yehoshua, who had seen all the great works of Yahuwah which he had done for Yisrael. And Yehoshua son of Nun, the servant of Yahuwah, died 110 years old, and they buried him within the border of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the mountains of Ephraim, on the north side of Mount Gash. And all that generation were likewise gathered to their fathers. And another generation arose after them who did not know Yahuwah, nor the work which he had done for Yisrael. Then the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and served the Baals, and forsook Yahuwah Elohim of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Mizraim, and went after other mighty ones of the people who were all around them, and they bowed down to them and provoked Yahuwah. So they forsook Yahuwah and served Baal and the Asherites. And the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Israel. Therefore he gave them into the hands of plunderers, who despoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around. And they were unable to stand before their enemies any longer. Wherever they went out, the hand of Yahuwah was against them for evil, as Yahuwah had spoken, and as Yahuwah had sworn to them, and they were distressed greatly. Then Yahuwah raised up rulers who saved them from the hand of those who plundered them. However, they did not listen to their rulers either, but went whoring after other mighty ones and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their fathers walked, and obeying the commands of Yahuwah, they did not do so. And when Yahuwah raised up rulers for them, Yahuwah was with the ruler and saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the ruler. For Yahuwah had compassion on their groaning because of those who oppressed them and crushed them. And it came to be, when the ruler was dead, that they would turn back and do more corruptly than their fathers, to go after other mighty ones, to serve them and bow down to them. They did not refrain from their practices and from their stubborn way. And the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Yisra'eel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their fathers, and has not obeyed my voice, I also shall no longer drive out before them many of the nations which Yehoshua left when he died, in order to drive Yisra'eel by them, whether they will guard the way of Yahuwah, to walk in them as their fathers guarded them or not. So Yahuwah left those nations without driving them out at once, and did not give them into the hand of Yehoshua. Judges-Shophetim chapter 3. And these are the nations which Yahuwah left to try Yisra'eel by them, all those who had not known all the battles in Canaan. Only that the generations of the children of Yisra'eel might know, to teach them battle, only those who before did not know them. 5 princes of the Philistines are all the Canaanites and the Zidonians and the Hivites who dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal-Harmon to the entrance of Hamath. And they were to try Yisra'eel by them, to know whether they would obey the commands of Yahuwah, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moshe. Thus the children of Yisra'eel dwelt in the midst of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their mighty ones. Thus the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and forgot Yahuwah their Elohim, and served the Baals and the Asheroths, and the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, sovereign of Aram Naharaim. And the children of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. And when the children of Israel cried out to Yahuwah, Yahuwah raised up a Savior for the children of Israel, who saved them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. And the Spirit of Yahuwah came upon him, and he ruled Israel, and went out to battle. And Yahuwah gave into his hand Cushan-Rishathaim, sovereign of Aram Naharaim, and his hand prevailed over Cushan-Rishathaim, and the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. And the children of Israel again did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. And Yahuwah made Eglon, sovereign of Moab, strong against Israel, because they had done evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. And he gathered to himself the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. And the children of Israel served Eglon, sovereign of Moab, 18 years. And when the children of Israel cried out to Yahuwah, Yahuwah raised up a Savior for them, Ehud, son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man impeded in his right hand. And by him the children of Israel sent a present to Eglon, sovereign of Moab. And Ehud made himself a sword. It was double-edged and a cubit in length, and he girded it under his long robe on his right thigh. And he brought the present to Eglon, sovereign of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. And it came to be that when he had finished bringing near the present, he sent away the people bearing the present. But he himself turned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal, and said, I have a secret message for you, O sovereign. And he said, Be silent. And all those standing beside him went out from him. And Ehud came to him while he was sitting in his cool roof room. And Ehud said, I have a message from Elohim for you. So he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached with his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his stomach. And the handle went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the sword out of his stomach, and it came out behind. Then Ehud went out to the porch and shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. And when he had gone out, his servants came to look and saw the doors of the roof room were locked. So they said, he is only covering his feet in the cool roof room. And they waited until they were ashamed, but saw he was not opening the doors of the upper room. So they took the key and opened them, and saw their master fallen to the ground, dead. But while they were delaying, Ehud escaped, and had passed beyond the stone images, and escaped to Sarah. And it came to be when he arrived that he blew the ram's horn in the mountains of Ephraim, and the children of Yisra'eel went down with him from the mountains, with him leading them. And he said to them, Follow me, for Yahuwah has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan, leading to Moab, and did not allow anyone to pass over. And they smote about 10,000 men of Moab at that time, all robust and brave men, and not a man escaped. And on that day Moab was humbled under the hand of Yisra'eel, and the land had rest for 80 years. And after him was Shamka, son of Anath, and he smote 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he too saved Yisra'eel. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 4. And when Ehud was dead, the children of Israel again did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. Therefore Yahuwah sold them into the hand of Jabin, the sovereign of Canaan, who reigned in Hasor, and the commander of his army was Sisera, who was dwelling in Harosheth Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to Yahuwah, because he had 900 chariots of iron. And for 20 years he harshly depressed the children of Yisra'eel. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lepidor, was ruling Israel at that time. And she was dwelling under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel and the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for right ruling. And she sent and called for Barak, son of Aḍoni-Ḍebezeq, from Qadesh and Naphtali, and said to him, Has not Yahuwah Elohim of Israel commanded? Go, and you shall draw towards Mount Tabor, and shall take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Zebulun. And I shall draw unto you Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his company of the Wadi Kazan, and shall give him into your hand. And Barak said to her, If you go with me, then I shall go, but if you do not go with me, I do not go. And she said, I shall certainly go with you, only there shall be no esteem for you in the journey you are taking, for Yahuwah is going to sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So Deborah arose and went with Barak to Qadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Qadesh, and he went up 10,000 men under his command. And Deborah went up with him. And Heber the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moshe, has separated himself from the Kenites, and pitched his tent near the terebinth tree at Zaanaim, which is beside Qadesh. And they reported to Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera called all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Wadi Kizon. And Deborah said to Barak, Rise up, for this is the day in which Yahuwah has given Sisera into your hand. Has not Yahuwah gone out before you? And Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men after him. And Yahuwah destroyed Sisera and all his chariots and all his armor with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera leaped from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not one was left. Sisera, meanwhile, had fled on foot to the tent of Yisra'eel, the wife of Yehubah the Kenite, for there was peace between Yabin, sovereign of Hatzar, and the house of Yehubah the Kenite. And Yisra'eel went out to meet Sisera and said to him, Turn aside, my master. Turn aside to me, do not fear. So he turned aside with her into the tent, and she covered him with a blanket. And he said to her, Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. And he said to her, Stand at the door of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and asks you and says, Is there a man here? You shall say no. But Yisra'eel, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into the side of his head, and it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and exhausted, and he died. And see, as Barak pursued Sisera, Yisra'eel came out to meet him and said to him, Come, let me show you the man whom you are seeking. And when he went into his tent, there lay Sisera, dead with a peg in the side of his head. And on that day Elohim humbled Yabin, sovereign of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Yisra'eel. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Yabin, sovereign of Canaan, until they had cut off Yabin, sovereign of Canaan. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 5. And on that day Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang, saying, For leaders leading in Israel, for the people volunteering, bless Yahuwah. Hear, O sovereigns, give ear, O princes. I do sing to Yahuwah. I sing praise to Yahuwah Elohim of Yisra'eel. Yahuwah, when you went out from Seir, when you stepped from the field of Eden, the earth shook and the heavens poured, the clouds also poured water. The mountains flowed at the presence of Yahuwah. This Sinai at the presence of Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael. In the days of Shemkah, the son of Anath, in the days of Yisra'eel, the highways were deserted and the travelers went in crooked ways. Leadership ceased. It ceased in Yisrael until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Yisrael arose. They chose new mighty ones. Then fighting was in the gates. Neither a shield nor spear was seen among 40,000 in Yisrael. My heart is towards the lawgivers of Yisrael, the volunteers among the people. Bless Yahuwah. You who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk along the way, declare it. By the voice of shouters between the places of drawing water, there they recount the righteous acts of Yahuwah, the righteous acts of his leadership in Yisrael. Then the people of Yahuwah shall go down to the gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up, sing a song, arise, Barak, and lead your captives away, O son of Abinoam. Then he set the remnant to rule the nobles. Yahuwah came down for me against the mighty ones. Out of Ephraim their root is against Amalek. After you, Benjamin, with your peoples out of Machir, lawgivers came down, and out of Zebulun those who handled the scribes' reed. And the heads of Yisra'eel were with Deborah, and as Yisra'eel, so was Barak sent into the valley under his command. Among the divisions of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Why did you remain among the sheepfolds to hear the bleatings of the flocks? The divisions of Reuben have great searchings of heart. Gilead remained beyond the Jordan. And why did Dan remain on ships? Asher continued at the seashore and remained by its landing places. Zebulun is a people who risk their lives to the point of death. Naphtali also on the heights of the field. Sovereigns came, they fought. Then the sovereigns of Canaan fought in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no spoils of silver. From the heavens they fought. The stars from their courses fought against Sisera. The wadi of Kishon swept them away. That age-old wadi, the wadi of Kishon. O my being, you have trampled in strength. Then stamped hoofs of horses with the galloping of his steeds. Curse Mizraz, said a messenger of Yahuwah. Curse its inhabitants, because they did not come to the help of Yahuwah, among the mighty. Blessed above women is Yisra'eel, the wife of Yehova the Kenite. Above women in tents she is blessed. He asked for water, she gave milk. She brought out curdled milk in a bowl for nobles. She stretched her hand to the tent peg and her right hand to the workman's hammer. Then she pounded Sisera. She smashed his head. She pierced and struck through the side of his head. Between her feet he bowed. He fell. He lay still. Between her feet he bowed. He fell. Where he bowed, there he fell, destroyed. Through the window the mother of Sisera looked and cried out through the lattice. Why does his chariot delay to come? Why have the steps of his chariots tarried? The wise ones of her princesses answered her. Indeed, she answered herself. Do they not find and divide the spoil? A girl or two for each man? A spoil of dyed work for Sisera? A spoil of dyed work embroidered? Dyed work richly embroidered for the necks of the looter? So do all your enemies perish, O Yahuwah. But let those who love him be like the sun rising in its might. And the land had rest 40 years. Judges-Shophetim chapter 6. And the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian was strong against Yisra'eel. And before the faces of the Midianites the children of Israel made for themselves the refuges which are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. And it came to be, whenever Israel had sown, that Midian would come up, and Amalek and the people of the east would come up against them, and encamp against them, and destroy the increase of the soil as far as Azar, and leave no food in Yisra'eel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. For they came up with their livestock and their tents, coming in as numerous as locusts, and they and their camels were without number, and they came into the land to destroy it. Thus Yisra'eel was brought very low because of Midian, and the children of Yisra'eel cried out to Yahuwah. And it came to be, when the children of Israel cried out to Yahuwah because of Midian, that Yahuwah sent a prophet to the children of Israel, who said to them, Thus said Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael, I have brought you up from Mizraim and I brought you out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the hand of the Mizrites, and out of the hand of all your oppressors, and drove them out before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am Yahuwah your Elohim. Do not fear the mighty ones of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, and you have not obeyed my voice. And the messenger of Yahuwah came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gibeon threshed wheat in the winepress to hide it from the eyes of the Midianites. And the messenger of Yahuwah appeared to him and said to him, Yahuwah is with you, you mighty brave one. And Gideon said to him, O my master, if Yahuwah is with us, why has all this come upon us? And where are all his wonders which our fathers related to us, saying, Did not Yahuwah bring us up from Mizraim? But now Yahuwah has left us and given us into the hands of Midian. And Yahuwah turned to him and said, Go in this strength of yours, and you shall save Yisra'eel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? And he said to him, O Yahuwah, with what do I save Yisra'eel? See, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. And Yahuwah said to him, Because I am with you, you shall smite the Midianites as one man. And he said to him, Please, if I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who are speaking with me. Please do not move away from here until I come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you. And he said, I shall stay until you return. And Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot. And he brought them out to him under the terebinth tree and presented it. And the messenger of Elohim said to him, Take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. And the messenger of Yahuwah put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. And fire went up out of the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. And the messenger of Yahuwah went from his sight. And when Gideon saw that he was a messenger of Yahuwah, Gideon said, O Master Yahuwah, for I have seen a messenger of Yahuwah face to face. And Yahuwah said to him, Peace be with you. Do not fear. You do not die. And Gideon built an altar there to Yahuwah and called it Yahuwah Shalom. To this day it is still in Ophrah of the Ďebuzites. And the same night it came to be that Yahuwah said to him, Take the young bull of your father and the second bull of 7 years old, and you shall throw down the altar Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. And you shall build an altar to Yahuwah your Elohim on top of this rock in an orderly way, and shall take the second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the image which you cut down. And Gideon took 10 men from among his servants and did as Yahuwah had said to him. And it came to be, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city too much to do it by day, that he did it by night. And the men of the city arose early in the morning and saw the altar Baal was broken down, and the Asherah that was beside it had been cut down, and the second bull was being offered on the altar which was built. And they said to each other, Who has done this deed? And when they had inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, son of Joash, has done this deed. And the men of the city said to Joash, Bring out your son, so that he dies. For he has broken down the altar of Baal, and because he has cut down the Asherah that was beside it. And Joash said to all who stood against him, would you plead for Baal? Would you save him? Let the one who would plead for him be put to death by morning. If he is a mighty one, let him plead for himself, because his altar has been broken down. So that day he called him Yisra'eel, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he has broken down his altar. Now all Midian and Amalek and the people of the east were gathered together, and they passed over and encamped in the valley of Yisra'eel. Then the spirit of Yahuwah came upon Gideon, and he blew the ram's horn, and the Aḍoni-Ḍebezeq gathered behind him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also gathered behind him. And he sent messengers to Asher and to Zebulun and to Naphtali, and they came up to meet them. And Gideon said to Elohim, If you are saving Israel by my hand, as you have said, see, I am placing a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you are saving Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. And he rose early the next morning, pressed the fleece, and wrung dew out of the fleece to fill a bowl with water. And Gideon said to Elohim, Do not be displeased with me, and let me speak only this time. Please let me try only this time with the fleece. Please let it be dry only on the fleece, and let there be dew on all the ground. And Elohim did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, but there was dew on all the ground. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 7. And Yisra'eel, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose up early, and encamped by the fountain of Harod, so that the camp of Midian was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And Yahuwah said to Gideon, The people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands, lest Yisrael boast against me, saying, My own hand has saved me. And now proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, Whoever is afraid and trembling, let him turn back and leave Mount Gilead. And 22,000 of the people turned back, while 10,000 remained. And Yahuwah said to Gideon, The people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and let me prove them for you there. And it shall be, that of whom I say to you, This one goes with you, let him go with you. And of whomever I say to you, This one does not go with you, let him not go. So he brought the people down to the water. And Yahuwah said to Gideon, Everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, separate him from everyone who bows down on his knees to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. And all the rest of the people bowed down on their knees to drink water. And Yahuwah said to Gideon, By the 300 men who lapped I save you, and shall give Midian into your hand. Let all the other people go, each to his place. And the people took food and their rams' horns in their hands. And he sent away all the rest of Israel, each to his tent, but kept those 300 men. Now the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. And it came to be on that night that Yahuwah said to him, Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down, you and Purah, your servant, to the camp, and you shall hear what they say, and after that let your hands be strengthened, and you shall go down against the camp. So he went down with Purah, his servant, to the edge of the armed men who were in the camp. And Midian and Amalek and all the people of the east were lying in the valley, as many as locusts, and their camels were as numerous as the sand by the seashore. And Gideon came, and see, a man was relating a dream to his companion, and said, See, I had a dream, and see, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and it came to a tent and smote it so that it fell and overturned, and the tent fell down. And his companion answered and said, This is nil else than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, a man of Yisra'eel Elohim, has given Midian and all the camp into his hand. And it came to be, when Gideon heard this dream related and its interpretation, that he bowed himself down, and he returned to the camp of Yisra'eel and said, Arise, for Yehuwah has given the camp of Midian into your hand. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a ram's horn into the hands of all of them, with empty jars and torches inside the jars. And he said to them, Watch me and do likewise, and see, when I come to the edge of the camp, do as I do. And I shall blow the ram's horn, I and all those with me. Then you shall also blow the ram's horns round about all the camp, and say, For Yehuwah and for Gideon. And Gideon and 100 men who were with him came to the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, as they had but newly posted the watch. And they blew the ram's horns and broke the jars that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the ram's horns and broke the jars, and held the torches in their left hands, and the ram's horns in their right hands for blowing. And they cried for Yehoshua and for Gideon. And each stood in his place round about the camp. And all the army ran and cried out and fled. And the 300 blew the ram's horns, and Yehoshua set the sword of each one against the other throughout all the camp. And the army fled to Beth-shittah toward Tezerah, as far as the border of Abel, Meholah by Tabbath. And the men of Yisra'eel were called from Naphtali and from Asher and from all Manasseh, and pursued Midian. Then Gideon sent messengers throughout all the mountains of Ephraim, saying, Come down to meet Midian, and capture from them the watering places as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were called and captured the watering places as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. And they captured 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, and slew Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb they slew at the winepress of Zeeb, while they pursued Midian. And they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon beyond the Jordan. Judges-Shophetim chapter 8. And the men of Ephraim said to him, What is this you have done to us by not calling us when you went to fight with Midian? And they contended with him sharply. And he said to them, What have I done as compared with you? Are the gleaners of Ephraim not better than the grape harvest of Aḍoni-Ďebezeq? Elohim has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, and what was I able to do as compared with you? And when he had said that, their rage toward him subsided. And Gideon and the 300 men who were with him came to the Jordan, passing over, weary yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Succoth, Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are weary, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, sovereigns of Midian. But the leaders of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? And Gideon said, Because of this, when Yehoshua has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I shall tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And he went up from there to Penuel, and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered him. So he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, When I come back in peace, I shall break down this tower. And Zebah and Zalmunna were at Quarka, and their armies with them, about 15,000 men. all who were left of all the army of the people of the east. Now those who had already fallen were 120,000 men who drew the sword. And Gideon went up by the way of those who dwell in tents on the east of Nobah and Yogbeha, and he smote the camp while the camp was at ease. And Zebah and Zalmunna fled, and he pursued them and captured the two sovereigns of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and shattered the entire army. And Gideon, son of Joash, returned from battle from the ascent of Hers, and captured a youth of the men of Succoth and questioned him. So the youth wrote down for him the leaders of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. And he came to the men of Succoth and said, See, Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are weary? And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth a lesson. And he broke down the tower of Penuel, and slew the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, How were the men whom you killed at Tabor? So they answered, They were like you, each one looked like the son of a sovereign. And he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Yahuwah lives, if you had let them live, I would not slay you. And he said to Yitha, his firstborn, Rise, slay them. But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise yourself and fall on us, for as a man is, so is his might. So Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments which were on their camels' necks. So the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I do not rule over you, nor does my son rule over you. Yehuwah does rule over you. And Gideon said to them, I have a request to make of you, that each of you give me the ring from his spoil. For they had rings of gold, because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We shall certainly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the ring from his spoil. And the weight of the gold rings that he requested was 1,700 pieces of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and purple robes which were on the sovereigns of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. And Gideon made it into a shoulder garment, and set it up in his city Ophrah. And all Israel went whoring after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his house. Thus Midian was humbled before the children of Israel, and they lifted their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Yerubbabel son of Joash went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he gave him the name Abimelech. And Gideon son of Joash died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Aḍoni-Ḍebezeq. And it came to be, when Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again went whoring after the Baals, and made Baal-berith their mighty one. Thus the children of Israel did not remember Yahuwah their Elohim, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies round about, nor did they show kindness to the house of Yerubbabel, Gideon, according to all the good which he did for Yisra'eel. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 9. And Abimelech, son of Yerubbabel, went to Shechem to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the clan of the house of his mother's father, saying, Please speak in the hearing of all the masters of Shechem, which is better for you that 70 men, all the sons of Yerubbabel, rule over you, or that one man rule over you. And you shall remember that I am your own flesh and bone. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the masters of Shechem. And their heart inclined toward Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the house of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men. And they followed him. And he went to his father's house at Ophrah and slew his brothers, the 70 sons of Yerubbabel, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Yerubbabel, was left, because he hid himself. And all the masters of Shechem gathered together, and all of Beth-millo, and they went and made Abimelech sovereign beside the terebinth tree at the post that was in Shechem. And they informed Jotham, and he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted his voice and cried out and said to them, Hear me, you masters of Shechem, and let Elohim hear you. The trees went forth to anoint a sovereign over them, and they said to the olive tree, Reign over us. And the olive tree said to them, Shall I leave my oil, with which they esteem mighty ones and men, and go to sway over trees? Then the trees said to the fig tree, Come, reign over us. And the fig tree said to them, Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to sway over trees? Then the trees said to the vine, Come, reign over us. And the vine said to them, Shall I leave my new wine, which rejoices mighty ones and men, and go to sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, Come, reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If in truth you anoint me as sovereign over you, come, take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. And now, if you have acted in truth and integrity in setting up Abimelech to reign, and if you have acted well with Yehudah and his house, and have done to him as his hands did to you, for my father fought for you, and risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. But you have risen up against my father's house today, and slew his 70 sons on one stone, and set up Abimelech, the son of his female servant, to reign over the masters of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted in truth and integrity with Yerubbabel and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the masters of Shechem and Beth-millo, and let fire come out from the masters of Shechem and from Beth-millo, and devour Abimelech. Then Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there, for fear of Abimelech his brother. And Abimelech governed Yisra'eel 3 years, and Elohim sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the masters of Shechem. And the masters of Shechem acted treacherously against Abimelech, in order that the violence done to the 70 sons of Yerubbabel might come, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother, who slew them, and on the masters of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to slay his brothers. And the masters of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed over by them along that way, and it was reported to Abimelech. And Gaal, son of Ebed, came with his brothers and passed over to Shechem, and the masters of Shechem put their trust in him. and went out into the fields, and gathered their vineyards, and trod out, and held a feast. And they went into the house of their mighty one, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal, son of Ebed, said, Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebulun his officer? Serve the men of Hamah, the father of Shechem? But why should we serve him? If only this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, Increase your army and come out. And when Zebul, the governor of the city, heard the words of Gaal, son of Ebed, his displeasure burned. And he sent messengers to Abimelech by deceit, saying, See, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and see, they are besieging the city against you. And now get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be as soon as the sun is up in the morning, then rise early and rush upon the city. And see, when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you shall do to them as your hand finds to do. And Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose up by night and laid in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance to the city gate. And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, See, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, You are seeing the shadows of the mountains like men. And Gaal spoke again and said, See, people are coming down from the high part of the land, and another company is coming from the diviners, turbot tree. And Zebul said to him, Now where is your mouth with which you said, Who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Are not these the people whom you despised? I beg you, go out and fight them now. So Gaal went out, leading the masses of Shechem, and fought Abimelech. And Abimelech pursued him, and he fled from him. And many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech stayed at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers, so that they would not dwell in Shechem. And it came to be the next day that the people went out into the field, and they informed Abimelech. And he took his people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid in wait in the field, and looked and saw the people coming out of the city. And he rose against them and smote them. And Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city. And the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and smote them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and captured the city, and slew the people who were in it. And he broke down the city, and sold it with salt. And all the masters of the tower of Shechem had heard that, and entered the stronghold of the house of El-Berith. And it was reported to Abimelech that all the masters of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went up to Mount Salmon, he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a branch from the trees, and took it and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, What you have seen me do, hurry, do as I have done. And all the people likewise cut down each one his own branch, and followed Abimelech, and put them against the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire above them, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Abimelech then went to Ďebezeq, and he encamped against Ďebezeq and captured it. However, there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and women and all the masters of the city fled there, and shut themselves in, and went up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on the head of Abimelech and crushed his skull. He then immediately called the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed him." And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Yisrael saw that Abimelech was dead, each one went to his own place. Thus did Elohim repay the evil of Abimelech, which he had done to his father, to slay his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem Elohim turned back on their own heads, and the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on them. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 10. And after Abimelech, there arose Tola, son of Puah, son of Dodo, a man of Yisra'eel, to save Yisrael. And he dwelt in Shimma, in the mountains of Ephraim. And he ruled Yisrael 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shimma. And after him arose Yisra'eel, a Gileadite, and he ruled Yisrael 22 years. And he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. And they had 30 towns which are called Havoth Yair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Yair died and was buried in Quamon. And the children of Israel again did evil in the eyes of Yehuwah, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, and the mighty ones of Aram, and the mighty ones of Sidon, and the mighty ones of Moab, and the mighty ones of the children of Ammon, and the mighty ones of the Philistines, and forsook Yehuwah and did not serve him. Therefore the displeasure of Yehoshua burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines, and into the hands of the children of Ammon. And they crushed and oppressed the children of Israel that year for 18 years, all the children of Israel who were beyond the Jordan, in the land of the Amorites in Gilead. And the children of Ammon passed over the Jordan to fight against Yehudah and against Benjamin, and against the house of Ephraim, so that Yisrael had great distress. And the children of Israel cried out to Yehoshua, saying, "We have sinned against you, because we have both forsaken our Elohim and served the Baals." So Yehoshua said to the children of Israel, "Was it not from the Perizzites, and from the Amorites, and from the children of Ammon, and from the Philistines that I saved you? And the Zidonians, and Amalek, and Maon oppressed you, and you cried out to me, and I saved you from their hand. But you have forsaken me, and served other mighty ones. Therefore I do not save you again. Go and cry out to the mighty ones which you have chosen. Let them save you in your time of distress." And the children of Israel said to Yehoshua, "We have sinned. Do to us whatever is good in your eyes. Only deliver us today, please." So they put away the foreign mighty ones from their midst, and served Yehoshua, and his being was grieved with the trouble of Yisra'eel. Then the children of Ammon were called together and encamped in Gilead, and the children of Israel gathered together and encamped in Mizpah. And the people, the heads of Gilead, said to each other, "Let the man who is the first to fight against the children of Ammon be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." Judges-Shophetim, chapter 11. And Yehudah the Gileadite was a mighty brave one, but he was the son of a whore. And Gilead brought forth Yehudah, and the wife of Gilead bore sons. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Yehudah out and said to him, You shall not have an inheritance in the house of our father, for you are the son of another woman. And Yehudah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. And worthless men banded together with Yehudah and went out with him. And it came to be some time later that the children of Ammon fought against Yisra'eel. And it came to be when the children of Ammon fought against Yisra'eel that the elders of Gilead went to bring Yehudah out of the land of Tob. And they said to Yehudah, Come, and you shall be our commander, and let us fight against the children of Ammon. But Yehudah said to the elders of Gilead, Did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why have you come to me now when you are in trouble? And the elders of Gilead said to Yehudah, That is the reason we have turned to you, that you shall go with us and fight against the children of Ammon, and be our head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. And Yehudah said to the elders of Gilead, If you take me back home to fight against the children of Ammon, and Yahuwah give them to me, am I to be your head? And the elders of Gilead said to Yehudah, Yahuwah is witness between us, if we do not do according to your words. Then Yehudah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people set him over them as head and commander. And Yehudah spoke all his words before Yahuwah in Mizpah. And Yehudah sent messengers to the sovereign of the children of Ammon, saying, What is between you and me, that you have come to fight against me in my land? And the sovereign of the children of Ammon said to the messengers of Yehudah, Because Yisrael took my land when they came up out of Mizraim, from the Arnon as far as the Yabah and to the Yarden, and now give back those lands in peace. But Yehudah again sent messengers to the sovereign of the children of Ammon, and said to him, This is what Yehudah said, Yisrael did not take the land of Moab, nor the land of the children of Ammon. But when they came up from Mizraim, and Yisrael walked through the wilderness as far as the Sea of Reeds, and came to Qadesh, then Yisrael sent messengers to the sovereign of Edom, saying, Please let me pass over through your land. But the sovereign of Edom would not listen, and they also sent to the sovereign of Moab, but he refused, so Yisrael stayed at Qadesh. Then they went through the wilderness and around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came to the east side of the land of Moab, and encamped beyond Arnon. But they did not enter the border of Moab, for Arnon was the border of Moab. And Yisrael sent messengers to Sihon, sovereign of the Amorites, sovereign of Heshbon. And Yisrael said to him, Please let us pass over through your land into our place. But Sihon did not trust Yisrael to pass over through his border. And Sihon gathered all his people together, and they encamped in Yahatz and fought against Yisrael. And Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Yisrael, and they smote them. So Yisrael took possession of all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that land. Thus they took possession of all the border of the Amorites, from Arnon to the Yabog, and from the wilderness to the Yarden. And now Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael has driven out the Amorites from before his people. Yisrael, should you then possess it? Whatever Chemosh, your mighty one, gives you to possess, do you not possess it? And all that which Yahuwah our Elohim takes possession of before us, we possess. And now, are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, sovereign of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel? Did he ever fight against them? while Yisra'eel dwelt in Heshbon and its villages, and in Aurora and its villages, and in all the cities along the banks of Arnon, for 300 years. Why did you not recover them within that time? So I have not sinned against you, but you are doing me evil by fighting against me. Let Yahuwah, the judge today between the children of Yisrael and the children of Ammon. But the sovereign of the children of Ammon did not listen to the words which Yehudah sent him. And the spirit of Yahuwah came upon Yehudah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed through Mizpeh of Gilead, and from Mizpeh of Gilead he passed on toward the children of Ammon. And Yehudah made a vow to Yahuwah and said, if you give the children of Ammon into my hands, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall belong to Yahuwah, and I shall offer it up as a burnt offering. Yehudah then passed on toward the children of Ammon to fight against them, and Yahuwah gave them into his hands. And he smote them from Aurora as far as Minnith, 20 cities, and to Abel Keramim, with a very great slaughter. Thus the children of Ammon were humbled before the children of Yisra'eel. And Yehudah came to his house at Mizpah, and saw his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrels and dancing. Now except for her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to be when he saw her that he tore his garments and said, O my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you are among those who trouble me. And I have given my word to Yahuwah, and I am unable to turn back. And she said to him, my father, if you have given your word to Yahuwah, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, because Yahuwah has taken vengeance for you upon your enemies, the children of Ammon. And she said to her father, let this be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, and let me go and wander on the mountains, and bewail my maidenhood, my friends and I. Then he said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months. And she went with her friends, and bewailed her maidenhood on the mountains. And it came to be at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she knew no man. And it became a statute in Yisra'eel that the daughters of Yisra'eel went every year for 4 days to lament the daughter of Yehudah the Gileadite. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 12. And the men of Ephraim gathered together and passed over toward Siphon, and said to Yehudah, why did you pass over to fight against the children of Ammon, and did not call us to go with you? We are going to burn your house over you with fire. And Yehudah said to them, my people and I were in a great struggle with the children of Ammon, and when I called you, you did not save me out of their hands. And I saw that you would not save me. Then I took my life in my hands and went over against the children of Ammon. And Yahuwah gave them into my hand. And why have you come up to me today to fight against me? Yehudah then gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the men of Gilead smote Ephraim, because they had said, you Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim, in the midst of Ephraim, in the midst of Manasseh. And Gilead captured the fords of the Jordan that faced Ephraim. And it came to be when the fugitives from Ephraim said, let me pass over, the men of Gilead said to him, you are an Ephraimite. If he said no, then they would say to him, please say Shibboleth. And he would say Sibboleth, for he was unable to pronounce it right. Then they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. And at that time there fell 42,000 Ephraimites. And Yehudah ruled Yisrael 6 years. And Yehudah the Gileadite died, and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. And after him Ibzan of Bethlehem ruled Yisrael. And he came to have 30 sons and 30 daughters. He sent abroad and brought in 30 daughters for his sons. And he ruled Yisrael 7 years. And Ibzan died and was buried at Bethlehem. And after him Elon the Zebulunite ruled Yisrael. And he ruled Yisrael 10 years. And Elon the Zebulunite died, and was buried at Ayalon in the land of Zebulun. And after him Abdon, son of Hillel, the Perizzites, ruled Yisrael. And he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode on 70 young donkeys. And he ruled Yisrael 8 years. And Abdon, son of Hillel, the Perizzites, died, and was buried in Parathon, in the land of Ephraim, in the mountains of the Amalekites. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 13. And again the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of Yehoshua. So Yehoshua gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man from Zorah of the clan of the Anites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and had not borne. And a messenger of Yehoshua appeared to the woman and said to her, See now, you are barren and have not borne, but you shall conceive, and you shall bear a son. And now please guard, and do not drink wine or strong drink, and do not eat any unclean food. For look, you are conceiving and bearing a son, and let no razor come upon his head. For the youth is a Nazarite to Elohim from the womb on, and he shall begin to save Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And the woman came and spoke to her husband, saying, A man of Elohim came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of a messenger of Elohim, very awesome. But I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not declare to me his name. And he said to me, See, you are conceiving and bearing a son. And now drink no wine, nor strong drink, nor eat any unclean food. For the youth is a Nazarite to Elohim from the womb to the day of his death. And Manoah prayed to Yehoshua and said, O Yehoshua, please let the man of Elohim whom you sent come to us again, and teach us what to do for the youth who is to be born. And Elohim listened to the voice of Manoah. And the messenger of Elohim came to the woman again as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. And the woman ran hurriedly and informed her husband and said to him, See, he has appeared to me, the man who came to me the other day. And Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man. And he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now let your words come true. What is to be the rule for the youth's life and his work? And the messenger of Yahuwah said to Manoah, Let the woman guard all that I said to her. Let her not eat any food that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink, or eat any unclean food. Let her guard all that which I have commanded her. And Manoah said to the messenger of Yahuwah, Please let us detain you, and prepare a young goat for you. And the messenger of Yahuwah said to Manoah, Though you detain me, I do not eat your food. But if you offer a burnt offering, offer it to Yahuwah. for Manoah did not know he was a messenger of Yahuwah. Then Manoah said to the messenger of Yahuwah, "What is your name? When your words come true, then we shall esteem you." And the messenger of Yahuwah said to him, "Why do you ask my name, since it is wondrous?" And Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it upon the rock to Yahuwah. And he did wondrously while Manoah and his wife looked on. And it came to be, as the flame went up toward the heavens from the altar, that the messenger of Yahuwah went up in the flame of the altar. And Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. And the messenger of Yahuwah did not appear any more to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was a messenger of Yahuwah. And Manoah said to his wife, "We shall certainly die, because we have seen Elohim." But his wife said to him, "If Yahuwah had been pleased to put us to death, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all this, nor would he have let us hear the like of this." So the woman bore a son and called his name Shimshon. And the child grew, and Yahuwah blessed him. And the spirit of Yahuwah began to move him at Mahaneh Dan, between Zoar and Eshtaol. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 14. And Shimshon went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. And he went up and informed his father and mother, saying, "I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines, and now take her for me for a wife." But his father and mother said to him, "Is there no woman among the daughters of your brothers or among all my people, that you should take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" And Shimshon said to his father, "Take her for me, for she is pleasing in my eyes." However, his father and mother did not know that it was of Yahuwah that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines were ruling over Yisra'eel. Then Shimshon went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and came to the vineyards of Timnah, and saw a young lion came roaring at him. And the spirit of Yahuwah came mightily upon him, and he tore it apart as the tearing apart of a young goat, with naught in his hand. But he did not make known to his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and spoke to the woman, and she pleased Shimshon well. And when he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and saw a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took some of it in his hands and went along eating. And he came to his father and mother and gave them, and they ate. But he did not make known to them that he took the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down to the woman, and Shimshon gave a feast there, for young men used to do so. And it came to be, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Shimshon said to them, "Please let me put forth a riddle to you. If you clearly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I shall give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of garments. But if you are unable to explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen shirts and 30 changes of garments." And they said to him, "Put forth your riddle, and let us hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater came forth food, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And for 3 days they were unable to explain the riddle. And it came to be on the 7th day that they said to Shimshon's wife, "Entice your husband to explain the riddle to us, or else we burn you." and your father's house with fire? Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is it not? And Shimshon's wife wept before him and said, You only hate me and do not love me. You have put forth a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me. And he said to her, Look, I have not explained it to my father or my mother, and should I explain it to you? And she had wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And it came to be on the 7th day that he informed her because she pressed him so much. She then explained the riddle to the sons of her people. And the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion? And he said to them, If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Then the spirit of Yahuwah came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon, and smote 30 of their men, stripped them, and gave the changing of garments to those who had explained the riddle. And his displeasure burned, and he went back up to his father's house. And Shimshon's wife was given to his companion, who had been his friend. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 15. And it came to be after some time in the days of wheat harvest that Shimshon visited his wife with a young goat. And he said, Let me go into my wife into her room. But her father would not permit him to go in. And her father said, Indeed, I thought that you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead. And Shimshon said to them, This time I am blameless regarding the Philistines, if I do evil to them. And Shimshon went and caught 300 foxes, and took torches, and turned them tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails, and set the torches on fire, and sent them out into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, even the vineyards and olive trees. And the Philistines said, Who did this? And they answered, Shimshon, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took away his wife and gave her to his companion. Then the Philistines went up and burned her and her father with fire. And Shimshon said to them, Though you do this, yet I shall take revenge on you, and after that I cease. And he smote them hip and thigh, a great slaughter, and went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Itam. The Philistines then went up and encamped in Yehudah, and spread out against Lehi. And the men of Yehudah said, Why have you come up against us? And they answered, We have come up to bind Shimshon, to do to him as he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Yehudah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam, and said to Shimshon, Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? Why have you done this to us? And he said to them, As they did to me, so I did to them. And they said to him, We have come down to bind you, to give you into the hand of the Philistines. And Shimshon said to them, Swear to me not to fall on me yourselves. And they spoke to him, saying, No, but we are certainly going to bind you, and shall give you into their hand, but certainly not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes, and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. And the spirit of Yahuwah came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it, and smote 1,000 men with it. And Shimshon said, with the jawbone of a donkey, 1 heap, 2 heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have smitten 1,000 men. And it came to be, when he had ended speaking, that he threw the jawbone from his hand, and called that place Ramath-lehi. And he became very thirsty, and cried out to Yahuwah, and said, You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. And now am I to die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? And Elohim split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit came back, and he revived. So he called its name Hapkor, which is in Lehi to this day. And he ruled Yisrael 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 16. And Shimshon went to Uzzah, and saw a woman there, a whore, and went in to her. The Anites, saying, Shimshon has come here. So they went round and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city, and kept silent all night, saying, In the morning, when it is daylight, then we shall kill him. Now Shimshon lay until midnight, and rose at midnight, and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 gate posts, and pulled them up with the bar, put them on his shoulders, and took them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. And it came to be afterward that he loved a woman in the Wadi Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the princes of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, Entice him, and find out where his great strength lies, and see by what we might overpower him. Then we shall bind him to humble him. And let us give you, each one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Shimshon, Please reveal to me where your great strength lies, and by what you might be bound to humble you. And Shimshon said to her, If they bind me with 7 fresh cords, not yet dried, then I shall be weak and be like any other man. The princes of the Philistines then brought her 7 fresh cords, not yet dried, and she bound him with them, while those lying in wait stayed with her in the room. And she said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. But he broke the cords as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength remained unknown. And Delilah said to Shimshon, Look, you have mocked me and spoken lies to me. Now please reveal to me by what you might be bound. And he said to her, If they bind me tightly with new ropes that have never been used, then I shall be weak and be like any other man. And Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. And those lying in wait were sitting in the inner room, but he broke them off his arms like a thread. So Delilah said to Shimshon, Until now you have mocked me and spoken lies to me. Reveal to me how you might be bound. And he said to her, If you read the 7 locks of my head with the web. Then she fastened it with a pin, and said to him, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. But he awoke from his sleep, and pulled out the pin of the loom and the web. Then she said to him, How do you say I love you, when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and have not made known to me where your great strength lies. And it came to be when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, so that his being was wearied to death. And he made known to her all his heart, and said to her, No razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to Elohim from my mother's womb. If I were shaven, then my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. And Delilah saw that he had made known to her all his heart, and she sent and called for the princes of the Philistines, saying, Come up once more, for he has made known to me all his heart. So the princes of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hand. And she made him sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and shaved off the 7 locks of his head. Thus she began to humble him, and his strength left him. And she said, The Philistines are upon you, Shimshon. And he awoke from his sleep and said, Let me go out as before at other times, and shake myself loose. But he did not know that Yahuwah had turned aside from him. So the Philistines took him and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Aza, and bound him with bronze shackles, and he became a grinder in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again, after it had been shaven. And the princes of the Philistines gathered to offer a great slaughtering to Dagon, the mighty one, and to rejoice. And they said, Our mighty one has given Shimshon, our enemy, into our hands. And the people saw him and praised their mighty one, for they said, Our mighty one has given into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, who slew many of us. And it came to be, when their hearts were glad, that they said, Call for Shimshon, and let him entertain us. So they called for Shimshon from the prison, and he entertained them. And they made him stand between the columns. And Shimshon said to the young man who held him by the hand, Let me alone, and let me feel the columns which support the house, so that I lean on them. And the house was filled with men and women, and all the princes of the Philistines were there. And about 3,000 men and women were on the roof, who watched Shimshon entertaining. And Shimshon called to Yahuwah, saying, O Master Yahuwah, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, only this time, O Elohim, and let me avenge myself on the Philistines with vengeance for my 2 eyes. And Shimshon took hold of the 2 middle columns which supported the house, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. And Shimshon said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself mightily. And the house fell on the princes and all the people in it. And the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life. And his brothers and all his father's household came down and took him, and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, in the tomb of his father Manoah. And he had ruled Yisra'eel 20 years. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 17. And there was a man from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Milcah. And he said to his mother, The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, Look, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, Blessed of Yahuwah be my son. And he gave back the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I had truly set apart the silver from my hand to Yahuwah for my son, to make a carved image and a molded image, and now I give it back to you. And he gave the silver back to his mother, and his mother took 200 pieces of silver, and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Milcah. Now the man Milcah had a house of mighty ones, and made a shoulder garment and house idols, and he ordained one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no sovereign in Yisrael. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And there was a young man from Bethlehem in Yehudah of the clan of Yehudah. And he was a Levite, and he was sojourning there. And the man went out of the city of Bethlehem in Yehudah to sojourn wherever he could find a place. And he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, Where do you come from? And he said to him, I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Yehudah, and I am on my way to find a place to sojourn. And Micah said to him, Dwell with me, and be a father and a priest to me. And I give you 10 pieces of silver per year, and a suit of garments, and your food. And the Levite went in. So the Levite agreed to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and he was in the house of Micah. And Micah said, Now I know that Yahuwah does good to me, since I have a Levite as priest. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 18. In those days there was no sovereign in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day all the inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not yet fallen to them. And the children of Dan sent 5 men of their clan, brave men from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. And they said to them, Go search the land. So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and spent the night there. When they were near the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and turned aside, and said to him, Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place, and what do you have here? And he said to them, Micah had such and such for me, and he hired me, and I have become his priest. And they said to him, Please inquire of Elohim, and we shall know whether the journey on which we are going is prosperous. And the priest said to them, Go in peace, your journey on which you go is before Yahuwah. Then the 5 men left and came to Laish, and saw the people who were in their midst, how they dwelt safely, according to the ruling of the Zidonians, at rest and unsuspecting, and no one possessing authority in the land was reproaching for any matter. And they were far from the Zidonians, and they had no word with anyone. And the spies came back to their brother Azorah and Eshtaol, and their brother said to them, What do you say? And they said, Arise and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and look, it is very good. And you sit still, do not hesitate to go to enter in to possess the land. When you go, you are to come to an unsuspecting people, and the land is spacious. For Elohim has given it into your hands, a place in which there is no lack of any matter which is on the earth. And 600 men of the clan of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed for battle. And they went up and encamped in Yehoshua in Yehudah. Therefore they call that place Mahatna Dan to this day. See, it is west of Yehoshua. And they passed over, and there to the mountains of Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah. And the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land of Laish answered and said to their brothers, Do you know that there are in these houses a shoulder garment, and house idols, and a carved image, and a molded image? And now you know what to do. And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, the house of Micah, and greeted him. And the 600 men armed for battle, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up, and entering there they took the carved image, and the shoulder garment, and the house idols, and the molded image, while the priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed for battle. And these went into Micah's house, and took the idol, and the shoulder garment, and the house idols, and the molded image. Then the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be silent. Put your hand over your mouth, and come with us, and be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Yisra'eel?" And the heart of the priest was glad. And he took the shoulder garment, and the house idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. And they turned and went and put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. They had gone some distance from the house of Micah, when the men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan, and called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter, that you have gathered such a company?" And he said, "You have taken away my mighty ones which I made, and the priest, and you are leaving. Now what more do I have? What is this you say to me? What is the matter?" And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest men bitter of being fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." And the children of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Then they took what Micah had made, and the priest who had belonged to him, and went to Laish, to a people who were at rest and unsuspecting, and smote them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no word with anyone. And it was in the valley that belonged to Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born to Yisra'eel. But previously the name of the city was Laish. And the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image. And Jehonathan, son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan, until the day the land was taken into exile. And they set up for themselves the carved image of Micah, which he had made, all the days that the house of Elohim was in Shiloh. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 19. And it came to be in those days, when there was no sovereign in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the further side of the mountains of Ephraim. And he took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Yehudah. And his concubine committed whoring against him, and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Yehudah, and was there 4 months. And her husband arose and went after her to speak to her heart, and bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. And she brought him into her father's house. And the father of the young woman saw him, and he was glad to meet him. And his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him, and he dwelt with him 3 days. And they ate and drank and spent the nights there. And it came to be on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he prepared to leave. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh your heart with a piece of bread, and afterward go your way." So they sat down, and the two of them ate and drank together. And the young woman's father said to the man, "Please agree to stay all night and let your heart be glad." And when the man arose to go, his father-in-law urged him. So he spent the night there again. And he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to go. But the young woman's father said, "Please refresh your heart." So they lay until afternoon, and both of them ate. And the man arose to go, he and his concubine and his servant. But his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, "See, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Stay here and let your heart be glad. And you shall rise early tomorrow for your journey, and you shall go to your tent." But the man would not stay that night. And he arose and left, and came to a place opposite Yebus, that is Jerusalem. And with him were the 2 saddled donkeys, and his concubine with him. They were near Yebus. And the day was far spent, and the servant said to his master, "Come, please, and let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites, and spend the night in it." And his master said to him, "Let us not turn aside here into a city of foreigners, who are not of the children of Yisra'eel, but we shall pass over to Gibeah." And he said to his servant, "Come, let us draw near to one of these places, and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah." And they passed over and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned off there to go in to spend the night in Gibeah. So he went in, and he sat down in the open square of the city, but no one would take them into his house to spend the night. But see, an old man came in from his work in the field that evening, who also was from the mountains of Ephraim. And he was sojourning in Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he lifted up his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" And he said to him, "We are passing over from Bethlehem in Yehudah to the other side of the mountains of Ephraim. I am from there, and I went to Bethlehem in Yehudah, and I am going to the house of Yahuwah, and there is no one taking me into his house. Yet there is both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself, and for your female servant, and for the young man who is with your servant. There is no lack of any matter." And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all your needs be on me. Only do not spend the night in the open square." And he brought him into his house, and gave fodder to the donkeys. And they washed their feet, and ate and drank. They were making their hearts glad. And see, men of the city, sons of Belial, surrounded the house, beating on the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, so that we may know him." But the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, "No, my brothers, I beg you, do no evil. Since this man has come into my house, do not do this folly. Look, here is my maiden daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now, and humble them, and do with them what is good in your eyes, but do not do such a foolish matter to this man." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. And they knew her, and rolled themselves on her all night until morning, and let her go when the day began to break. And as morning appeared, the woman came back, and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was, till it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way, and saw his concubine fallen at the door of the house, with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, "Rise up, and let us go." But there was no answer. Then he took her on the donkey. And the man rose and went to his place, and came into his house, and took a knife, then laid hold of his concubine, and cut her up limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the borders of Yisra'eel. And it came to be that all who saw it said, There has never been, and there has not been since, the like of this from the day that the children of Yisrael came up from the land of Mizraim until this day. Set your heart on it, take counsel, and speak up. Judges-Shophetim, chapter 20. And all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, and from the land of Gilead, and the congregation assembled as one man before Yahuwah at Mizpah. And the leaders of all the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of Elohim, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. And the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. And the children of Israel said, Speak up, how did this evil come about? And the man, the Levite husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, My concubine and I went into Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the masters of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They thought to kill me, but instead they humbled my concubine, and she died. Then I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the land of the inheritance of Yisrael, because they committed wickedness and folly in Yisrael. Look, you are all children of Yisrael. Speak and give your counsel here. And all the people rose as one man, saying, Let not one of us go to his tent, nor any of us turn back to his house. And now this is what we do to Gibeah. Go against it by lot. And we shall take 10 men out of every 100 throughout all the tribes of Yisrael, and 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, to make food for the people, to prepare for their going to Gibeah in Benjamin, for all the folly they did in Yisrael. And all the men of Yisrael were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. And the tribes of Yisrael sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, What is this evil that has come about among you? And now give us the men, the sons of Belial, who are in Gibeah, so that we put them to death and put away evil from Yisrael. But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the children of Yisrael. So the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Yisrael. And from their cities at that time the children of Benjamin registered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who registered 700 chosen men. Among all this people there were 700 chosen men who were left-handed. Each one could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss. And besides Benjamin, the men of Israel registered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of battle. And the children of Israel rose and went up to Bethel to ask of Elohim. And they said, Who of us go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin? And Yahuwah said, Yehudah first. And the children of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in battle array to fight against them at Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin came out at Gibeah, and on that day cut down to the ground 22,000 men of the Israelites. But the people, the men of Israel, strengthened themselves and again formed the battle line at the place where they had put themselves in array on the first day. And the children of Israel went up and wept before Yahuwah until evening, and asked of Yahuwah, saying, Should I again draw near for battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? And Yahuwah said, Go up against him. And the children of Israel drew near to the children of Benjamin on the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day, and cut down to the ground 18,000 more of the children of Israel. All these drew the sword. And all the children of Israel, even all the people, went up and came to Bethel and wept and sat there before Yahuwah and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before Yahuwah. And the children of Israel asked of Yahuwah, the ark of the covenant of Elohim was there in those days. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, Should I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or should I cease? And Yahuwah said, Go up, for tomorrow I give them into your hand. And Israel set ambushes all around Gibeah, and the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day, and put themselves in battle array against Gibeah as at the other times. And the children of Benjamin came out to meet the people, drawn away from the city. And they began to smite some of the people, slaying as at the other times in the highways, of which one went up to Beth-el, and the other to Gibeah, in the field about 30 men of Yisra'eel. And the children of Benjamin said, They are going to be smitten before us as previously. But the children of Israel said, Let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. And all the men of Israel rose from their place and put themselves in battle array at Baal Tamar. And the ambush of Yisra'eel broke forth from their position in Mar Gibeah. And 10,000 chosen men from all Israel came against Gibeah, and the battle was fierce, but they did not know that calamity was close to them. And Yahuwah smote Benjamin before Yisrael, and the children of Israel destroyed 25,100 men on that day in Benjamin. All these drew the sword. And the children of Benjamin saw that they were smitten. And the men of Israel had given ground to the Benjamites, because they trusted in the ambush that they had set against Gibeah. And the ambush hurried and came against Gibeah. And the ambush spread out and smote the entire city with the edge of the sword. And the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise up from the city. Then the men of Israel would turn in battle, and Benjamin began to smite dead about 30 of the men of Israel. For they said, They are indeed smitten before us as at the first battle. Then the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, and the Benjamites looked behind them and saw the entire city going up in smoke to the heavens. And when the men of Israel turned back, the men of Benjamin were troubled, for they saw that calamity was close to them. And they turned their backs before the men of Israel toward the way of the wilderness, but the battle overtook them, while those who had come out of the cities were destroying them in their midst. They surrounded the Benjamites and pursued them, and with ease trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah toward the east. And there fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. All of these were mighty men. And they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. And they cut down 5,000 of them on the highways, and followed after them up to Gidon, and smote 2,000 of them. And all who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men, who drew the sword. All of these were mighty men. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. And they dwelt at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin, and smote them with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts, all who were found. And they set fire to all the cities they came to. Judges-Shophetim chapter 21. And the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, Not one of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife. So the people came to Beth-el and sat there until evening before Elohim, and lifted up their voices and wept bitterly, and said, O Yehoshua Elohim of Israel, why has this come about in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? And it came to be on the morrow that the people rose early and built an altar there, and brought burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the children of Israel said, Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with the assembly to Yahuwah? For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to Yahuwah at Mizpah, saying, He shall certainly be put to death. And the children of Israel were sorry for Benjamin their brother, and said, One tribe is cut off from Israel today. What do we do for wives for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by Yahuwah not to give them our daughters as wives? And they said, Which one of the tribes of Israel did not come up to Mizpah to Yahuwah? And see, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh-Gilead to the assembly. For when the people called a roll, see, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead was there. And the congregation sent out there 12,000 of their bravest men, and commanded them, saying, Go, and you shall smite the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead with the edge of the sword, even the women and children. And this is what you do. Put under the ban every male and every woman who has known a man by lying with him. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead 400 young maidens who had not known a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then all the congregation sent and spoke to the children of Benjamin, who were at the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin turned back at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh-Gilead. But even so there were not enough for them. And the people were sorry for Benjamin, because Yahuwah had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. And the elders of the congregation said, What do we do for wives for those who remain, since the women have been destroyed out of Benjamin? And they said, There is an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, and no tribe is to be destroyed from Israel. But we are unable to give them wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn an oath, saying, Cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. So they said, See, there is a yearly festival of Yahuwah in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebanon. And they commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, Go, lie in wait in the vineyards, and watch, and see. When the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then you shall come out from the vineyards, and every man catch a wife for himself from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And it shall be, when their fathers or their brothers come to us to complain, that we shall say to them, Favor us with them, because we did not take a wife for any of them in battle. Neither have you given them to them, making yourselves guilty of your oath. And the children of Benjamin did so, and took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt the cities and dwelt in them. And the children of Israel went from there at that time, each one to his tribe and clan. And they went from there, each one to his inheritance. In those days there was no sovereign in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.